Are we live now?
I did, I just turned everything on and we can start with roll if you'd like.
Yes, let's do roll call.
Go down to the bottom. Chair Solomon,
Present.
Commissioner Auxier,
Present.
Commissioner Beach,
Present.
Commissioner Bobette,
Present.
Commissioner Freeman,
I'm here.
Commissioner McPherson on his way back, Commissioner Norton. Senator Persiansky. And then Representative Lewis.
Here.
We have quorum.
All right, this is the March 19th meeting of the Oregon Criminal Justice Commission. I'm Paul Fallon, chair. Our first item on the agenda is public comment. Do we have anybody sign up?
We did not have anybody signed up.
All right, legislative update.
Thank you. So I'm going to kick off the meeting today with just a brief update on all of the work that has been happening over the last month and a half, but really several months of the legislative session. And just talk about some portions of a couple of bills that impact the Criminal Justice Commission and the work that we'll have to do moving forward. First, I'd just like to note that a few months ago, when Bridget was presenting on sentencing rule changes, we'll have to return to a little bit more work. There were a few sentencing changes that were passed in various bills during legislative session. We're monitoring those bills now to see timing for governor's signatures, but we do anticipate April or May to do another round of sentencing rule changes, most likely May, since we're halfway through March and not everything has been signed yet. So that's just the first thing to keep a heads up on, that we'll be working on that. Looming larger is House Bill 4002, which I know most folks in this room were paying at least somewhat attention to as it moved through the process. That's the bill that sought to address changes to ballot measure 110. Obviously, there's a lot of things in that 60-page bill. Don't have time to go over all of them today, but there are a number of new programs that are being created under the Criminal Justice Commission. I just want to describe really quickly and then leave some room for questions. The largest new program that's created is the Oregon Behavioral Health Deflection Program within the Criminal Justice Commission. That is a program that is technically being created under our impacts grant infrastructure. We don't talk a lot about impacts in our meetings because impacts statutorily, when it was created back in 2019, was actually created as an independent arm essentially of the commission, where you as commissioners do not necessarily have oversight of the awarding of those funds. That pre-existing group has had $10 million per biennium to award out. We award to several tribes within the state and then a small number of counties. And that is for work that is trying to address the overlap between behavioral health needs and hypermagnetic needs within those counties. This new program that will exist under that impacts infrastructure is a deflection program. And the goal would be to have every county within the state and every tribe within the state to eventually have some sort of deflection program. And the purpose of these deflection programs would be to provide a front end alternative to the criminal justice system for folks who are possessing user amounts of drugs. That grant has been funded at around $21 million for this initial funding cycle. And we are just waiting on the governor's signature to begin the official work on all of it. But in the background, we're beginning work in earnest. We've been working with the Association of Oregon Counties and other stakeholders to try to figure out where counties are at. The biggest thing that we have to worry about with this grant is that the legislature has really impressed upon us the need for a very, very fast rollout. And so as part of that, we are statutorily required to provide 50% of grant funding to a select group of 23 counties who signed on during the legislative process to be early adopters. And that has to be done within 60 days. And then the rest of our funding, assuming counties want to sign on, we have provided assurances to the legislature that we'll be able to do that within 6 months, which is a pretty aggressive timetable for a new program creation. One thing I will mention is that in House Bill 4002, you know, I said earlier that impacts is kind of a separate animal from the commission. And that was how it was set up when it was first designed, but I was hoping to build some greater bridges between us as a commission and that impacts work. And so we changed the grant review committee lineup to include 2 commissioners. And so I've been speaking with a few of you today. I've not made it to everybody to talk about possible interest in filling one of those slots. Those slots are then appointed by our chair. And our hope is to have those slots filled for our tentative meeting, which is scheduled for April 2nd, because like I said, we need to move very, very quickly. In addition to the new program creation, there are data reporting requirements. All of our grantees will be required to use a data system developed by this commission. We're going to leverage the pre-existing data system we have for our other impacts grantees, which is administered by Oregon Health and Sciences University called REDCap. And so that's how we'll do that portion of the work. We are also required to do racial and ethnic impact analyses of both the recriminalization of possession, but then also to monitor the demographic characteristics of folks who are charged with delivery of controlled substances as well. And that reporting will also start in earnest. There was a budget note attached to a separate bill that required us to come back in the 25 session and to provide a first look at that. Our first official report does not happen until 2025.
Before you move on, Ken, is there additional funding for the administration of the impacts deflection program?
Yes. For the entire package, which we've not even gotten all the way through it yet, we were given funding for 5 positions at the agency, which would take our total number of folks in the agency up to 35.
Wow.
1 researcher and then 4 folks on the policy granting side to assist us there. Specifically, I would say that about 3 of them would be devoted to the deflection portion of the grant managers. But then the other one would be devoted to the other program that was created, which was a jail Medicaid or a MOUD program. And so that was what I was going to move on to next, is that we also have a new grant to fund local county or city jails for medication assisted treatment or Medicaid assisted reentry when they transition out, when folks transition out of custody. And that is funded at $10 million. That will run much more traditionally through you all as commissioners. That is on a slightly slower timescale, primarily because the bill requires us to make rules before we begin. For the deflection program, this initial rollout of funds will feel very much, for folks who were around for original JRI, it'll feel very similar to that, where it's done quickly. And we're following the statute as far as what the program requirements are, as opposed to going through a rulemaking process.
So what do you think the timeline will be for the MOUD program?
It'll just be a couple months behind. I'll defer to Ryan for that.
Because of rulemaking, we anticipate reopening the solicitation in July.
But I think our goal is to initiate the rules advisory committee. Were we thinking the beginning of next month? Yeah. Yeah, so one of the new statutory requirements of the state is that except in certain circumstances, we are to convene a committee of folks to advise us on the content of the rules. So that's where we'll begin, and then you should expect to see rules in front of you. Would we thinking May maybe for that, or draft rules June?
Hard to tell right now.
A little hard to tell. But soon, especially if we're hoping to release in July.
Yeah.
And so the last things that I'll finish on, like, so there was a lot in this bill. We have a summary that, if we sent the summary out to everybody, okay, a summary that everybody has seen. But the other highlight that I will provide is, we in 4002, even though it's not connected to the deflection grant program or to the jail grant program, we received additional funding for specialty courts. And it's a little bit complex if you're looking at 5204, House Bill 5204, because that's the funding bill for the policy bill. There's a couple things going on. And one of the really interesting pieces is that we worked in partnership with the judicial department. Normally, in every one of our specialty court grants, out of the $20-odd million we give out, around $7 to $8 million goes directly to the judicial department to pay for court coordinators, such as Ben, who we saw today in the hearing earlier. We have now worked with the legislature to shift all of those court coordinators to general fund directly through the judicial department. And the really exciting news about that is it means when we start our grant cycle for 25-27, we won't have to fund that $7 to $8 million of court coordinators through our grant funds like we normally do, which will free up that amount of money to go towards treatment adjacent supports and other county level needs. And so we're getting more money now to fill the gap that existed in this current grant cycle, and we will have more money going forward, which is pretty exciting. I think my time is up, and so I'll take any questions that folks have. But I'd also ask you just to, if you have any questions from the sheet that we did send out, please feel free to reach out to me.
Great. Thank you. A lot of exciting stuff there. We're going to hear from folks from OHSU and PSU about the gun violence program. And I think Kathleen, it's you and Susan. Thank you.
And Alexis, who's coming up too. Thanks.
Yes, present.
Okay. We can't see you now, but we can see you for a bit. Yeah, you don't get to see him both ways. I'm sorry. Okay. But you can see this. Hello, hi.
Hi.
Thank you for having us here today and sharing your in-person time with us while you're here in Portland. It's great to put faces to names and see familiar faces too. So we're excited to share some updates and next steps on the CJC funded Gun Violence Review Commission. We'll do introductions first. I'm Kathleen. I'm the lead of this project. I'm a professor of public health at the OHSU PSU School of Public Health, trained in injury and violence prevention research, and I've been doing it for over 20 years now. I also work at the Portland VA, do some injury and violence prevention work for veterans. But just really carry the torch for using public health approaches for reducing violence in our communities. I will hand it over to you, Alexis.
Thank you, Dr. Carlson. My name is Alexis Ferrara-Ratambuga. I am the Gun Violence Review Commission Manoma coordinator, and I coordinate the activities day to day. A little bit about me: I was born out of country in East Africa. I grew up in an area or an environment where civil war was a daily life, and so I experienced a lot of gun violence. And came over to the U.S. in 2008 and went to school in Wisconsin and did my undergrad, and I did my master's in public health at OHSU. I've been working there since 2012, but I was doing biomedical research, and then I decided to shift to public health. That's how I end up working with Dr. Carlson. But outside of work, I've been a vice president of Rwandan community, which has a big population there, and I've collaborated with other communities when we organize events. So as a vice president, I experienced a lot of gun violence. Some of my community members that I was leading, they've been in jail. Some of them have been victims. Some of them are they were the defendant in certain crimes in Manoma County. And my also family side, I have some family members who have been on both sides of gun violence victims as victims or survivor or defendant as well. So when it's a great honor and opportunity to serve under this commission, because this challenge of gun violence has been very close to home, and I'm honored to be here.
Thank you, Alexis. Susan?
Yeah, hi, Susan DeFrancisco. I'm a senior project manager under Kathleen. And I also have training in injury prevention, and I've been in public health for about 40 years now, in different capacities, but mostly focusing on injury prevention. And relevant to this, I've had a lot of experience in public policy and also in working with communities and community coalitions. So I bring that, and just at this point in my career, I'm so grateful to be working on this issue and with the team I work with. Very fortunate. And we have a couple of people who aren't here today, but I can't believe that's something.
You can see Susan, crown jewel, Alexis, crown jewel of this project. But also Nicole and Becca, Nicole Sarah and Becca Valak, who are actually running a Gun Violence Review Commission meeting that starts at 1, just so happened to land on this same day too, and we'll all be joining when we can too. But Nicole comes to us with over a decade of public health experience too, and strengths in project leadership and coordination, and also evaluation skills. And Becca is finishing her Master's of Science in Public Health at the Johns Hopkins School of Public Health. And she's been working with the Center for Gun Violence Solutions at Hopkins. And so came to us with some real specialized skills related to gun violence prevention, and is working full-time with us and doing a wonderful job at managing all the details that this commission requires. Okay, we can flip. Next slide. Thank you. Okay, so just a little bit about the genesis of this, a refresher, I guess, and the overall purpose. So the Gun Violence Review Commission came out of a series of meetings in 2021 that DA Mike Schmidt initiated with myself and some other faculty in the School of Medicine, School of Public Health. We pulled in our colleagues at the State Health Department, Office of Violence Prevention from the City of Portland, and Multnomah County Health Department. And over a series of months, we had these meetings that I like to call the intercultural exchange meetings, where they shared with us the approach to examining and prosecuting cases of gun violence, and shared several series with us. And we shared with them what it means to take a public health approach, what we tend to do in our circles. And even across the cases that they shared with us in this series of meetings, our brains were like popping, like we had all these aha moments already, like, oh, the patterns are just visible to us. And when I say patterns, it's really like those upstream structural level or systems level factors or environmental things that we tend to focus on in public health that are upstream of down where people find themselves entangled in events that beget violence sometimes. So moving way upstream, the purpose of the mission then is to take deep dives into a series of cases and with a big multidisciplinary group of people who are either front lines or community advocates, lived experience, working in the organizations that address gun violence. So many different perspectives that will often be siloed and not communicating together, getting them in the same room to examine a series of cases and finding those patterns between the cases from their perspectives. The public health approach, I would say, as it relates here, is this multidisciplinary piece, our focus on the systems and environments and trying to find gaps and fill those gaps in the systems and environments, and the focus on upstream prevention. And I'll hand it over to you, Alexis.
All right, thank you, Dr. Carlson. So this is how we do our cases. So we receive the cases from the DA's office. So far, we have 132 cases going from January 1st, 2029 through November 30th, 2023. And these are cases of gun homicide or attempted homicide cases. These are closed cases, and they've been prosecuted by the DA's office that resulted in a guilty verdict or guilty plea. That's the case that we do review. And the way we do them is we have the commission members. We choose 2 cases. We've been doing 2 cases per month, and once we select the cases to review, we send them to commission members, which are the multidisciplinary that Dr. Carlson just mentioned, different commission member from the police, PPB, OHSU, and education department, we have public school there, and other agencies that are part of the commissions represented by their members. We send them the 2 cases that we selected, and we send them the name of the people involved, in this case, the defendant and the survivor or the victim, and we send as well their birthday in an encrypted email. So once they receive that, they review, they look at it, and they find information they have on those on the individuals that we sent them, and then they send us information, either if they provided service to them, if there've been a point of contact at some point in their service that they provided the community, and they send us the information. We collect the information, we got the information, and then we summarize the information for the commission, And the day of review, we provide that summary information to the commission prior to the meeting. We also submit a formal request to police, a police record to the Portland Police Bureau, and they also send us as much as information they have on the individual, and we try to summarize as well that one as to the commission members that will provide that information at the beginning of the meeting. And then when we get together, like Dr. Carlson just said, like today, we have 2 cases that we will be reviewing today. So we present the summaries prior to the meeting, and then but it's kind of like a short version of the summary because they already read the summary. Once we summarize what we gathered from them, we send them out. We send an email out of the summary, because not everybody will have everybody's information. So we collect information from different disciplines. We summarize, put it together in a simple and concise summary. We send that to them. They review that before the meeting. And when they come to the meeting, we kind of just go through it one more time. And then we start the discussion about those cases. Currently, we are doing virtual meetings per month, and we are doing 2 meetings per month, trying to accommodate to everybody. But we are hoping to move into 1 meeting per month instead of doing 2 meetings per month, because it's not ideal to do 2 meetings about the same cases per month. And then at the meeting, once we start reviewing, my role and the team that Dr. Carlson presented is to present the fact, and then facilitate the discussion, and then and come up with some recommendation based on the discussion and the facts that were presented into the meeting. Everybody do sign a confidential statement prior to every single meeting before we get into the discussion to make sure the privacy is protected. And so we do quarterly. We have 1 meeting that we do quarterly that summarize the last 3 meetings that we've had. So far we've had a meeting from in January. We had 2 meetings about 2 cases, February and March. So in April, we are preparing to do a hybrid meeting, which will be a quarterly meeting. And the purpose of that meeting will be going back from the January cases and February and March, and try to identify some commonality or themes that may have been surfacing as we're doing these reviews at the end of each meeting, and come up with a actionable recommendation we can provide to the leadership team, which we'll talk about in a minute. Leadership meeting that will look into those recommendations and try to see how practical they are and how they can be implemented if deemed to be potential in terms of being effective in the community. So that is our quarterly meeting. So we have monthly meetings. After 3 months, we have 1 quarterly meeting, and that quarterly meeting is to summarize everything that we've been reviewing for the last 3 months to come up with recommendation that we deem actionable recommendation. So in May, that's where we're expecting to have that leadership committee, where we'll present the recommendation that will come up in the month of April, which is next month, in our quarterly meetings. So that's basically how the Gun Violence Review Commission has been running up to date.
Thank you, Alexis.
Yeah. Yes.
So we wanted to give you an idea of all our organizational members. We have 30, and it really is multidisciplinary. We have community-based organizations. A lot of them work with people who are at risk for gun violence, or else they're providing services to people who have experienced gun violence. And some focus on youth, you can see. And they also, some of them provide wraparound services to not only the person involved, but their families. We have community advocates, because we have we have quite a few people who have experienced gun violence. They haven't lived experience. We have a couple of people who lost their adult children to gun violence in the last couple of months, I'd say 6 months or so, a couple of years. We also have a business owner on our group, on the commission. We also have people who have been shot themselves and are now working in nonprofits and trying to give back to the community and working with other people at risk. We also have all our law enforcement in the county involved, which has been great and necessary. And we also have other county agencies, a real variety. So we have criminal justice, we have behavioral health, we have the DA's office, Justice here, he's one of our commission members. And the medical examiner, we have 2 circuit court judges on the commission serving with us. And then next slide, please, Carol. We have city agencies. We have the Office of Violence Prevention. We have someone from planning. We have the Portland Public Schools represented. And then that advisory committee is a citizen committee that advises the police on the budget items. State agencies involved, Oregon Health Authority, our state health department, and also the Oregon Department of Human Services. And then we have some healthcare organizations also, including the Emergency Department, which is you that sees a lot of gun violence victims. So the leadership committee that Alexis mentioned to you again is the committee that will take the recommendations from the commission. Recommendations are based on the case reviews. But the leadership committee's role is to actually discuss those recommendations, make sure they're actionable, and then try to implement them. And this is a tentative list. I can only tell you that some of these people have committed already. Some we will be reaching out to, and some, we're going back to after having said, would you be interested in this when we first started things? So it's tentative, but these are the people, again, multidisciplinary. And this list was developed like with recommendations from our commission members, from the DA himself, telling us who might be able to serve on the commission. These are the change makers, essentially, the people who can either be in touch with people who can make the change or drum up support for change. So that's that's who we're looking for, and hopefully we'll have that set up, because again, we want them to meet in May. The recommendations would have been developed by April. So I just wanted to tell you a little bit about how we recruited, before we get to our role, but how we recruited people, because it's been really interesting, both for the commission and we'll do it for the leadership committee. We asked everybody to meet with us for 30 minutes. And we met with people to give them an idea of what our purpose was and what their role would be. And they had some really interesting questions like, how is this different from other things going on? Is this public? Will people be appearing? And they talked a lot about, they were really interested and excited about the fact that it's so multidisciplinary, because they talked about working in silos. They talked about how that often impedes the work. So they were really excited about that. And I think we've all talked about how we walked away from those meetings going, people are really excited about this. They were thanking us for asking them to be on the commission. So it was very validating, and it was also very encouraging. They really wanted to be doing it. They wanted to work on this commission, give it a shot. So that's what we did. But I will tell you that we did have some skeptics, and I'm going to let Alexis talk a little bit about what came up and how we handled it, because I think that's important too. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Susan. Yes, like Susan just said, we had 2 skeptics who were, the first one was skeptical of the makeup of the commission. Their argument was that, most of the commission members, and mostly also in the leadership of the commission, the majority is more Caucasian. How is that commission not going to be, we will advocate for minority, especially African-American, who happen to be disproportionately impacted by the challenges of gun violence. And that was a legitimate question, but we would respond back and saying, hey, that's why we need you to be part of the commission, and that's why we're now picking only one discipline, but different discipline, but most important, different race. That's why we approached you. And so that, including myself, maybe I can also speak for myself a little bit. When Dr. Carlson was doing the interview or hiring, I remember the last question I asked her, I say, the purpose of this commission, is it to draft more punitive measure against Black minority or offenders, instead of coming with solutions that are less punitive but more life-changing or opportunities. And she said this is not a commission to craft more punitive measures. Instead, is to try to help out with the challenge. So that was my last question before I turned down this offer, because I had the same skepticism. But luckily, Marcel, one of the person in the members, they agree, they're now on board. Their skepticism were satisfied, and they joined, and they've been great member. We had another one who not only she had that skepticism of the leadership, but also she made a point of saying, most of you do not have the experience that we have as African American community. In other words, our pain. I don't feel like you understand our pain to be in the position of making these decisions or recommendations without going through the pain that we went through. And we really responded to her the same way, saying that's the more reason we need a person like you or similar person who has that pain experience they can bring to the table, so that when people are making recommendation, you'll be part of that team to make sure we consider everything, and you'll be speaking from the pain that we have not experienced. So the person did not join, but the person expressed interest of continue discussion with her team, moving forward. So those are the main skepticism that we had.
Thanks, Alexis. I think it's important too to know that we really have gotten a lot of feedback from our partners, from the commission members. And we've incorporated it as we go along. We've been very flexible in that, but we've also gotten some suggestions about who to invite, like Alexis was saying. If they couldn't themselves be a commission member, they would say, we really need this person to be on the commission. So it's really been something that's dynamic. Our list of members is dynamic. It will change. We've been adding people since we started, mostly because of the feedback we get. I think we can go to the next slide. Thank you.
Susan, Kathleen, we probably need to wrap up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Couple of minutes here.
So I'm gonna just let you look at this then, but I'm gonna go to the next slide. These are our roles, mostly staffing, and okay, so I think it'll be important to go through this slide.
Just to bridge that last one though, because I think it came off of the prior one, is we don't see this as our commission. We're a backbone and a support group and a facilitator of a commission of community organizations and community members.
Mhm.
So I think that's what that was intended to be.
Yeah. So yeah, we're learning from people that have come before us. We actually have, before we started up, we did a lot of talking to people who have done this before us, either through other commissions like this or fatality review committees that sit, that meet. And we still get that kind of help from someone at the College of Wisconsin, yeah. They have had a commission like this for 20 years, and the person that's co-founded and led it has been advising us. We also have help from Johns Hopkins Center for Gun Solutions. They have funding to help us, to help community commissions like this across the country. So they've been guiding us. And then I mentioned how flexible we learned we have to be really flexible, making changes in real time to improve the process, mostly from the feedback we're getting from the people involved. We're building partnerships and building trust. That's really, really important in this. We're building trust not only among the members, but between us as a team and the members. And then we really wanted to know that we know the value of this is all related to the multidisciplinary group that we've created. We think it's a pretty incredible group, an enthusiastic group. and the importance of implementing this. Nothing comes of this if we can't get those recommendations implemented and we really understand that. And we'll be supporting that leadership committee and we'll work to implement. And I know we're doing continuous evaluation. I think you probably got that message. We keep getting feedback, we keep making changes. We're gonna do some more formal surveys, we think, to get some more information, pointed information from our members. But I'm gonna hand it over to Kathleen to finish up.
Reporting to the public keeps coming up
Yeah.
in various ways. The public wants to know what this publicly funded commission is doing and if they can come sit in and observe. And you've heard how it's fragile. We're just congealing still with this group, and it's a brand new group. The process is fragile, and we don't want outside influences in there. We're also reviewing very private information for families, for communities, and individuals too. So we're walking this really fine line between needing to share with the public what their public funds are going to, but also preserving the sanctity of the process, if you will, and trying to figure this out as we go along. So we will, our compromise is to release a report in a month or so that explains how this first phase of review and recommendation and implementation goes. And then annually, we'll release a report that summarizes all of that that's occurred multiple times over the year, and then our evaluation process and how that's led us to make changes. Johns Hopkins is talking to us about becoming a mentor trainer site for other commissions that start up around the country. That's really exciting, I think, because of our fresh experience here. Leveraging the evidence that they've had from other jurisdictions, but also utilizing that or leveraging that and changing it for our own context. And they want us to help others do that same thing. And I think it could also lead to doing that in other jurisdictions around Oregon as well. The final thought, the final was just more of a personal piece. I have felt myself being verklempt several times during the commission. I tend to just observe and let the commission members discuss and do their thing. And there have been several times when, there's these aha moments or they're communicating, and it's just like that feeling of like, this wouldn't be happening if these people weren't all sitting together at the same time and the same place with the same goal in mind. And it's pretty magnificent. So we're really optimistic that this commission is unfolding the way that we planned and hoped. And we're only in this first cycle now. But I think that, we're going to see changes from this. We're really grateful for everybody for giving us a chance to do this, and still hoping that this does what we wanted to do.
Great, thank you very much. I don't think we have time for questions. But if commissioners have questions, I think there's email that we can follow up with you.
You bet.
Great,
Yeah.
super, thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you for giving us some time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, we're now gonna hear, again from the Foundation, about JRAP.
Thank you. Ian, are you gonna put this on?
Yeah, that's all right, Chair. So good afternoon. I'm Ian Davidson, Justice Reinvestment Program Manager. So today I'll be very briefly introducing the Justice Reinvestment Equity Program, and then I'll turn it over to the real experts in the room to talk more specifics about it. The thing I wanted to maybe stress as the PowerPoint is getting pulled up is that the JREP, or the Justice Reinvestment Equity Program, is one part of the overarching statewide justice reinvestment initiative. And so there are two grant programs. You want to advance? Oh, you're still working at that.
You're good. They can see this. They're looking at this.
Can they?
Oh, but in here. I don't know.
So, House Bill 3194 back in 2013, when that passed, there were, of course, different pieces of that initiative as outlined in the Justice Reinvestment Act. You're, of course, most familiar with the Justice Reinvestment Program. This, as I've mentioned before, is a companion piece to that, the Justice Reinvestment Equity Program.
I'm gonna stop sharing on this one so I can just share this one.
I'll just note that this is really an outgrowth of a report that was published in 2020. House Bill 3064 created a Justice Reinvestment Equity Advisory Committee, and they were tasked with several different things. Among them was to look at ways that we could improve justice reinvestment, the justice reinvestment that we're all familiar with. They made several recommendations, both to us as an agency, and could you go to the next slide?
Yes.
As well as to the legislature. The key recommendations that I wanted to highlight for today's discussion is that the recommendation was the CJC should support the incubation of culturally specific providers, and that the legislature should carve out direct funding for culturally specific organizations. The legislature took this feedback, and in 2022, they passed Senate Bill 1510. Here, this slide kind of does a compare and contrast between the two different grant programs in the Justice Reinvestment Initiative, JRP, which you're familiar with, and then JREP. I won't go through every line item here, but I do wanted to highlight the different grant recipients, counties versus culturally specific organizations, community-based organizations, different enabling legislation. However, because they're both part of the Justice Reinvestment Initiative, they have very similar goals. They're both focused on reducing prison usage, reducing recidivism, while keeping the community safe and holding individuals accountable. JREP has an additional goal, which is to promote racial equity. And then, of course, the key distinction for us as CJC staff is that JREP is administered by the Northwest Health Foundation Fund 2, which is an Oregon-based organization, nonprofit that administers the grant. They do it with a lot of help, and you'll have a chance to hear from them just momentarily.
And Ian,
Yes.
this was funded through a POP, right? It wasn't, it's not part of CSL.
It is not, no, it's not part of CSL, no. If I remember correctly, it came from the emergency board and then, yeah.
Okay.
So as it relates to commission staff, we have certain responsibilities here. We, of course, need to distribute the funds to Northwest Health Foundation to implement the grant. And then, however, probably more significant is that we have an evaluation role. So in the bill that created JREP, CJC was tasked with evaluating the implementation of JREP and monitoring the progress of subgrants, meaning the grants to the community-based organizations provided by Northwest Health Foundation. To accomplish this, we hired 2 evaluators, which you'll hear from momentarily. We've also convened an advisory group to assist with that evaluation. And then in January, we reported on how much money went out to which organizations, what type of organizations. That was a requirement of the bill. And then in September, we will complete our evaluation requirements by submitting a report to the legislature with recommendations for additional evaluation needs if needed. So that concludes my portion. Next up, you will hear from Dr. Angela Adai from the University of Oregon and Monica Cox from 1002 Consulting. They are our hired evaluators that are shepherding us through this evaluation process.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Angela Adai. I'm an assistant professor of law at the University of Oregon. I am one of the members of the evaluation team.
And I'm Monica Cox. I'm an independent researcher, evaluator, organizational support, do all sorts of things related to data and research here in Oregon.
So thank you so much for your time today. We wanted to share a little bit about the JREP evaluation and what it looks like. We are taking our legislative charge from SB 1510, Section 16A, where we have this statutory mandate that requires the CJC to evaluate the implementation of JREP and monitor the progress of subgrants provided to the Northwest Health Foundation Fund 2. And so we are particularly zoning in on a couple of different words in this statutory mandate, primarily that idea of the CJC being responsible for the evaluation and that evaluation being an implementation evaluation. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that means in a second. Ian also mentioned the stakeholder group. We've been referencing them as stakeholder group or advisory group. And so the CJC has convened a stakeholder group to assist with this evaluation as is required by Section 16A of SB 1510. And that is notable because that group is mandated that it be composed of culturally diverse persons with expertise in culturally responsive evaluations, persons with expertise in criminal justice issues, and sub-grantees receiving funds under Section 15. So what that looks like for us is we've convened a group of 9 members representing different grantees for one, other community-based organizations, community corrections, and that advisory group is really instrumental in shaping and designing and helping us think largely about what this evaluation looks like. And so you met Billy earlier today. Billy is one of our advisory group members, along with other community-based organizations and representatives, people with these experiences mentioned, expertise in criminal justice issues, sub-grantees, et cetera, to help us in designing and implementing the evaluation process. SB 1510 also requires certain characteristics for the evaluation team. So that's Monica and I. We're a mighty team of 2 conducting this evaluation. And so SB 1510 requires that the evaluators have expertise in racial equity, facilitation of community-based participatory evaluation methods, and demonstrated experience with facilitating inclusive process with diverse communities. So Monica and I both capture all of those criteria, and we're happy to share with you more about our experience. Many of you I've met before working with the JRI evaluation. Monica also is engaged in lots of community-based research across the state. And then lastly, SB 1510 requires that we submit a report to the legislature coming from the CJC. And so that report is due to the legislature September 30th of this year. And that report has a couple of things. One, that report is going to detail the progress of the evaluation. And then it's also going to include recommendations for additional evaluation needs.
So what is this evaluation and what is it not? This is an evaluation of the implementation of JREP. And I just want to acknowledge that we heard earlier that it's important that we understand that the impact of this program is actually helping to meet the statewide goals of reducing prison use. And I think specific to JREP, it's also reducing disproportionality experienced by communities of color in prison use. That is not going to be something that we'll find in our evaluation because we are only focused on implementation. That's for practical reasons mostly. One is the timing doesn't work out for us. This evaluation has to be completed by September. The report has to be due by September. The program in this pilot phase is going through the end of 2025, I believe. So that's part of the reason why our report will include some recommendations for future evaluation. And the other is that the statute explicitly calls for a progress report. But for adaptive reasons, I would say that JREP is an emerging program itself that provides subgrants to emerging programs. And so just in the tradition of evaluation and finding programs and processes that work and don't work, it is very, very, very early for this type of program. And so we're sensitive to that in this evaluation. And when we talk about recommendations, we do think that it's important to consider what does long-term look like. Our process is to also try to identify what are some of those earlier indicators that can help us know that we're building the right path and where course correction can be made if that's necessary. So we actually worked with our advisory group as well as the larger network of community-based organizations across the state who met in Silverton. I think we heard Billy mention that to co-create what we want out of this evaluation. And this is a long list of evaluation goals, but what really stands out for us is that we're wanting something that's really holistic and comprehensive to look at all aspects of what's happening with JREP right now, and to also really honor the voices and lived experience and expertise of the participants themselves. Those are the program, people who are running the programs, people who are participating in the programs, And that's also inclusive of the JREP partners, Northwest Health Foundation, who we consider evaluation participants, and Latino Coalition as well.
So as you hear us talk about this evaluation and talk about the evaluation goals, some of the terms that we use to describe our approach to this evaluation may not feel familiar to you in an evaluation context. We use words like trust, community, holistic. So this is an intentional approach to move away from traditional evaluation frameworks to center equity. The ecosystem of partners that we've been collaborating with on this evaluation, from Northwest Health Foundation to the LCCL, to the advisory group, the learning communities, the grantees themselves, the program itself, as articulated by the legislature, all has an emphasis on equity. And so we wanted to make sure that we incorporate that equity lens in the evaluation as well. And so what that looks like is that our evaluation is co-created. Every component of the evaluation has had at least the fingerprints of the grantees, at least the fingerprints of people who are doing the work on the ground. And so that looks like engaging them in the evaluation design, engaging them in the evaluation implementation, and of course, engaging them in the recommendation process as well. We also want to place a particular emphasis on amplifying marginalized voices. You heard Cleo mention that many of our grantees, this is their first time receiving a grant this large. Also, I heard her say before that this is many of our grantees' first time receiving state funding at all. I think it was like 80% or something like that of our grantees who have never received state funding. So we want to make sure that those voices are captured in the evaluation and letting them tell their own stories about what it's like to do this work on the ground. We see some of our grantees being very involved in the community, but some of them are, one of them is a one-man show. People working out, off of their savings, or people who are committed to doing this work regardless of and outside of JREP. And so we want to make sure that their voices and their approach and their concerns are captured in the evaluation. Their challenges as well are captured in this evaluation. And then lastly, we want to center equity. Equity, again, is a critical component of the evaluation of JREP in general. You saw Ian's comparison slide that kind of the distinguishing factor between JREP and JRI was that equity goal. And so we want to make sure that we are honoring that in the evaluation as well.
So what exactly types of evaluation questions are we asking? So this evaluation is going to be mostly descriptive. It's going to be describing JREP as a program. It's going to be describing its goals, its plans, what's being done to implement it. And we're also going to do that at the level of subgrantees. And so we are exploring the development. How do we get to the actual JREP program and its defining characteristics? How is the grant being administered? Next slide. We're also going to be exploring the capacity building and technical assistance that's being provided. And also we'll be looking at the programs and services that are being funded and talking to the folks who are running that and the participants as well. And this is our roadmap and timeline. As I mentioned earlier, it's a pretty quick timeline in the scheme of evaluations for programs this big. We started planning at about this time last year, and planning has taken up the bulk of the time so far, and that's just the fact of a participatory process. We wanted to make sure that everybody was included every step of the way, and that takes time. So we are now in data collection mode, and we will wrap that up in May, and then we will go into analysis and writing. That's also going to be an inclusive process, and we'll have a draft of that report out to the CJC in August. So any prep work that needs to be done to get it to the legislature in September has plenty of time.
Thank you. Question.
Yeah.
So I understand that this isn't the outcomes evaluation, and for good reasons around timing, it didn't make sense. Is there a concurrent or consecutive process to do the outcomes evaluation?
I would
Or is that
get
an Ian question?
Sure. So Senate Bill 1510 did not direct that. However, we were thinking forward. And so we've been working with Northwest Health Foundation as well as the Latino Coalition to grab some of those quantitative data and be sure to start collecting some of those select data right from the beginning. And so when there is an appropriate time, we won't have to, recreate the wheel. Yeah, exactly.
We've been thinking of this evaluation as more of a snapshot, just because the grantees actually only got their the funding in October, and then we have less than a year to produce a report to the legislature. So we won't have, a lot of information about the actual cycle of their program by the deadline articulated by the legislature.
This reminds me of restorative justice in some ways, where the timing's a little bit off, because, if we're gonna go back to the legislature and ask for more money, it's hard when we don't have all the data. And I think that's just the nature of new grant programs, the length of time it takes to launch them, and our biannual funding cycles.
Well, yes, and we hope that this at least is an
No,
indicator that, or at least to
absolutely.
demonstrate that we're on the right path. So that's, the point. And it is a learning resource and tool, not just for the program legislators, but for the grantees themselves and stuff.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So next up, I'd like to invite Cleo Tung, Program Officer with Northwest Health Foundation, as well as Jen Matheson, Program or Director of Programs from the Northwest Health Foundation.
Sure, I'm gonna talk if I want. Okay, so, Chair, Commissioners, my name is Jen Matheson. I'm with Northwest Health Foundation. Thanks for having us here today. At Northwest Health Foundation, we envision a just and equitable Oregon where people of every color and background have access to, good paying jobs, good schools, affordable healthcare. And, they have the kinds of supports that they need, that, we know are proven instead of punishment and retribution. But we also know that, certain communities in Oregon are disproportionately impacted by violence and incarceration. So our Black communities, Latinx communities, Native American, Pacific Islander, people with disabilities, the LGBTQ community are all disproportionately impacted. We also know that the funding for culturally specific and culturally responsive programming isn't where we want it to be. So that's where JREP comes in. So we're hearing about JREP, and we, again, as you've heard before, we see this really as an extension of what JRI is trying to achieve, and to kind of go deeper into the relationship with the communities that are impacted.
So I'm going to try to do an abbreviated version. The slide deck will be shared with folks, right?
Yeah.
So just really quickly, the planning process. We convened culturally specific and responsive providers from across Oregon to help plan the program. Next slide. We also contracted with the Latino Coalition for Community Leadership, which is a capacity building provider, to also help us think through the program. And they are providing direct coaching and technical assistance to our grantees. And they're online to share a little bit more too. Next slide. And so from the planning process, we landed on 3 funding priorities: violence reduction, reentry programs, and services for victims and survivors of violence. You all should have handouts to our request for proposal that has more detail on those. I hope we can send that to folks who are joining us online. Next slide. And so from the planning, we also landed on 2 grant types. So we have project grants, $225,000 over 27 months. This is geared more towards established organizations who already have programs running, can hit the ground running. And then the bulk of the funding, though, goes towards project grants with capacity building support. So that's $325,000 over 27 months. And this is for groups that need that additional support to build the internal infrastructure, things like finance, data, program design, those sorts of things. And they get paired with the Latino Coalition for Community Leadership to help build those infrastructure. So the coaching and technical assistance. And then a quick look at the numbers. So the JREP has an overall budget of $10 million. In 2022 and 23, we committed nearly $6 million in grants, and then nearly $2 million in capacity building and technical assistance. Sorry, back to the previous slide. I think it's really important to know, it's not on the slide though, that we received far more interest in the program than we expected. In our inaugural grant making process, we received over 80 applications, totaling more than $24 million in funding requests. So when you look at $10 million budget for JREP, $24 million in requests, clearly the need far exceeds our current capacity, and it's certainly something that we're thinking about for the
So
future.
Cleo, of the 7.7 that's allocated for grants, the remainder, is that for evaluation, administration? Where's the rest of the money?
Sure, yeah. I don't have the exact numbers, but the quick breakdown is there's staffing, right? We recognize that this is a new program, so the upstart is going to take a little bit more. We've also peeled off a little bit of extra funding and grants just to hold on to, because we know that emergent needs might come up with the capacity building that's happening. And then we also have set aside funds for convening. So we know that gathering people together to share experiences, build relationships with each other, really, costs money too, in terms of venue and kind of feeding folks and covering travel and lodging expenses and all that.
Great, thank you.
And then quickly, grantee spotlights, next slide. So we have 18 grantees in our cohort. They represent or serve 23 counties across the state. And next slide. Among the cohort is Love is Stronger. They are a violence reduction organization. They serve Black and African American youth and families in Portland. I noticed that they were also among the Gun Violence Review Commission organizational members. And I think it's really important to note they are led by folks who have been directly impacted by gun violence. So they're deemed credible messengers and are really experienced in helping to de-escalate violence. They do street outreach. They help also with wraparound services like job placement and financial literacy classes. There's also the Stronghold, which is a relatively new reentry services provider. They're based in Chiloquin, and they serve Native Americans and American Indians in Klamath County. And then lastly, we have Utopia PDX. So they are a victim and survivor services provider serving queer and trans Pacific Islanders across the state. And they offer peer support. And then I think it's also important to note they receive funding to provide traditional healing practices that often don't get funded by other sources, right? Things like song, food, and herbal medicine. So that was really quick, but I did want to just make sure that the Latino Coalition had time to share their approach to capacity building, and Phil will be joining as well to share his work as a grantee. Great.
Thank you, Cleo. So next up, we have the opportunity to hear from March Renner. She's the state director for the Latino Coalition for Community Leadership.
Crystal.
Oh, okay, Crystal is joining us virtually. So let me.
That's why I was dragging Alexis over before, so that they can still see that.
Where we go?
This one, yeah.
And can
Okay,
everyone hear me okay?
We can.
Awesome. Thank you, Ian. I'm Crystal Watson. I am the Deputy Executive Director for the Latino Coalition for Community Leadership. We were formed in 2003, started doing work in 2004. So we have 20 years of experience, and I've been with the organization for 11 and a half years. Next slide. And so our founders really experienced a lack of funding, resources, and support in communities, both urban and rural. The initial founding was looking at federal funding and where that was going, what states were getting it, where communities were getting it. And it tended to be the same groups, right? The same community-based organizations that were able to receive funding because they had a great infrastructure and great grant writers and knew how to tell their story. And so really kind of looking at other groups that were doing great work in their communities, deeply embedded, had lived experience, and but just didn't have the infrastructure or the grant writing capabilities to really sell themselves the same way. And so we were formed to offer that support, offer that technical assistance, and really thinking about it as like scaffolding on a building where the organization itself is autonomous, but we're just coming alongside, walking alongside to offer the capacity building and the technical assistance for these organizations to do their work and to strengthen themselves to become sustainable after funding ends. And so we really believe in a both and approach where government systems and larger entities alongside these smaller community and faith-based organizations can work together, because we all have our strengths and our weaknesses. And so we really believe in this like stronger together approach. Next slide. And so our whole purpose, mission, and focus is to advance resource equity and community well-being. We do this through what we call find, fund, form, and feature. Most of the time, organizations that we work with, they say, you know, it's great that you found us. Thank you so much for the funding that helps, but it's really the forming and then that feature piece that makes us stronger. And so that forming really is that capacity building. It is building the sustainability of the organization, helping them manage diversified funding, different reporting structures, data collection, to really strengthen that muscle and that organization for longevity. And the feature piece is so often our communities are talked about and not talked with. And so really trying to help bridge for organizations to be able to have people on commissions or have them at conferences, or really try to feature the great work that they're doing. And so they're at the table when these discussions and solutions are being formed. Next slide. And so for JREP, we're working with 15 organizations that received that capacity building grant from Northwest Health Foundation. And then we've helped walk alongside through the learning community and the grant making process to really help work with these organizations. Now that they're granted, we're really focused on what we call a PACE assessment and a capacity building plan. So organizations are looked at through 9 different subject areas on, administration and board development, program design, data collection, financial management, just different subtopics, and then build a capacity building plan with them on what they are most focused on, what they believe their weaknesses are, to really strengthen them there. Conduct quarterly virtual or in-person meetings with JREP grantees to build this ecosystem of work, and to do capacity building trainings in these target areas. And then I think that's it. If there's any questions, or pass it to Phil.
Any questions? Okay, Crystal, thank you very much. Next, I'm happy to introduce Phil Ortega. He is the director for LifeArt, a JREP grantee based in Southern Oregon. Phil.
She turns off the camera.
Thank you, Ian. Ian, would you mind going back one slide, please?
Of course, yes. Oh, wrong way.
Yep. Oh, we're missing one slide, but that's okay. Hi, Commission members. My name is Phil Ortega, and I am the current executive director for LifeArt, which is a youth program here in Southern Oregon. During my day job, I am an academic dean at a local charter school. I've been working in education for the past 24 years. Prior to that, I was in the U.S. military, the Marine Corps. After the military, I joined the U.S. Marshal's Office, and I wanted to make a difference in my life, and I wanted to have an outcome for helping kids. But I spent some time after the U.S. Marshals transitioning to education as a truancy officer. It made sense. I already had my military training and my DPEST, which is the training required for Oregon police agencies. And I learned a ton working with at-risk youth, specifically that the kids in the development of their age-appropriate changes, they lack critical thinking skills. And so the previous slide showed that out of 365 days a year, if I subtract weekends, summers, and holidays, kids only attend school 176 days in the state of Oregon. That means that they're out of school 189 days. They have more time out of school than in school. And so the question I had as a truancy officer, or as a dean, or a teacher, or a coach, or mentor, is how do I take that unstructured, unsupervised hours and do something meaningful that helps build capacity, critical thinking skills, a reduction in violence? How do I help young people advance their future outlook? So we created this program called LifeArt, and today LifeArt helps about 200 kids in Southern Oregon, and these are our primary programs that we offer. We offer the Keep Encouraging Youth program, and that is absolutely a program that JREP supports. We work with the district attorney's office, which is Ruby Harry, a local district attorney, deputy district attorney, and the juvenile justice director, Joe Ferguson. How this works is the young kids, when they commit low-level crimes, they're referred to LifeArt. The system is designed in juvenile justice in the district attorney's office, basically Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, right? 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Well, our nonprofits works outside of that, works in partnership, collaboration with police agencies, working in partnership with schools, district attorney, but we also work with families in their environment, in their homes when they need us. And typically young people need caring adults outside of those traditional hours, right? Evenings, weekends, holidays, days that they're not in school. Again, 189 days a year, they're out of school. So with our programming, we offer a one-on-one mentor to work with our young kids and curb criminality. It's those decision-making moments, right? It's those lapse in judgments. We want to be there when they're about to make a bad choice and walk them through some navigation. We partner with juvenile justice right now, so they give us kids directly that commit low-level crimes. We work with them, and in 6 months, if they stay out of trouble, the judge here will expunge their charges and not offer probation at that point. Our youth support groups, we offer mentorship programs where students, it's basically student-led, but the youth support group talks about how to focus on mental social well-being. It helps keep kids emotionally healthy, and it offers a positive outlet for kids. And then we have art programs. We've created huge murals in Jackson County in our community, in schools, and in their environment, so that young people are part of the decision and ownership in our neighborhoods. And that's a very positive, quick way to visualize the impact of young people in our community. So our programs are very centered around our community, our kids, and the needs specifically of the kids we serve. We're very proud and to be in partnership with the LCCL and Northwest Health Foundation because they made it possible for us. Prior to being involved in JREP, we were doing this work for the past 13 years in solitude. We called it Islands of Excellence. We had a great program, but now as part of JREP, we see the big picture. We partner with agencies across the state that are doing like work, and we're growing our own understanding based on everybody's expertise. We meet a couple times a year. I'm excited about this next meeting here in May, here in Southern Oregon, because we're again going to work together to find solutions. And there was a question earlier about outcomes. I can tell you that the kids that we're working with this year, of the seniors involved in our Life Art program, 100% of them will graduate high school this year. That is not traditional for the kids in general education, where only the state graduates about 80 to 86% of our students, specifically students of color, are overrepresented in the dropout rate. Our program focuses on giving them an outlet. And also increasing academic rigor and also daily attendance in schools. So a little bit about our program. I would love to show the next slide, Ian, where you can see the work in place. We really connect with kids in a very organic manner. And then we work with the families to walk alongside them. Like we actually go to the dinner table at their houses. We invite them to participate in our program. They're in the decision making. We love our kids, and we're not here for a one-night basic program. We're here until they graduate high school and enter post-high school career and technical readiness. So I'm here to answer any questions you might have, and I look forward to the outcomes in December 2025. Thank you.
Great. Commissioners, questions for Bill of the program? Great work. It's fascinating to hear about the work that you're doing. I was just mentioning to Ken too that unlike JRI, JREP is funding is available to serve youth, which isn't a tenet of JRI. So it's great to see that you're targeting this population in the ways that you are. Thank you very much, Phil.
Thank you. And just at the OHSU gun violence presentation that came before us, it's exciting to see that there's work on that side. Our program is focused on upstream. We want to prevent those negative situations from ever occurring by working on critical thinking skills early when they're in middle school. And the brain science is so interesting to me because when they're teenagers, they're not really thinking long term. And so that's why walking alongside a caring mentor is making a difference. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for volunteering for the commission. Thank you all.
Thank you. All right, do we have any additional questions for Cleo or Jen before we wrap up? Great. Well, thank you for your time today and sharing so much about JREP and the programs. I look forward to hearing more from you. All right, next up, we're going to talk about the new supplemental process for the additional JRI funds that were unallocated. And I think Ian's going to drive this
Yes.
conversation.
Good afternoon, commissioners. For the record, Ian Davidson, Justice Reinvestment Program Manager. So as Chair Solomon just mentioned, I'm here presenting about the supplemental round that you directed that we as staff put together. You did that back in your November commission meetings. As a reminder, we're looking at about $780,000 in unallocated justice reinvestment funds. That's as a result of 3 counties opting not to apply for formula justice reinvestment funding. In November, you directed us to do 4 things, which we have done. The first was to put together a proposal that would focus on restoration. The second was to take a look at capping funding for at $75,000 per county, creating a simplified application to reduce administrative burdens on counties. And then lastly, and perhaps most importantly, to do outreach to the counties. So we went out and did the outreach, and that has informed our staff recommendation for today. We are recommending that you allocate a cap of $100,000 to counties. That's based on the feedback we received from counties. However, our CJC staff spin on this is that each county put together 3 different budgets. One for a $100,000 cap, one for a $75,000 cap, and another for a $50,000 cap. So if there is so much demand for this particular amount of funding that the grant review committee can easily scale appropriately. And so that's our recommendation for that. We're also, here's the specific language that we're proposing in your packet. You'll see a draft solicitation that we've put together. So around restoration, this is the language we're proposing. Requests focus on restoration of programs funded or requested in this biennium or past biennia in the Justice Reinvestment Program. This could include restoring or expanding components that promote the existing operations of Justice Reinvestment Programs. And then here's our proposed timeline. If we propose to release the solicitation as soon as you all approve it, most likely Friday of this week. And then we would have application due in May. So counties would have about 2 months turnaround time, and then the grant review committee would meet in June, just before your June commission meeting. And so we could hopefully get money out the door June, maybe early July. Great. And that is it for the supplemental round presentation recommendation from staff.
Great, and so do you need action from us to take up the recommendations?
Yes, please.
Great, any questions for Ian? Great, I would entertain a motion to take up the staff recommendation to allow counties to apply for up to $100,000 with the focus on restoration of programs funded in this biennium or past biennium and JRI or JRP.
That was excellently stated. I'll just say ditto. I'll make that motion.
Great.
And I'll second.
All right, we have a motion made by Vice Chair Babette, seconded by Commissioner Beach. All the, we don't take roll.
Chair Solomon,
Aye.
Commissioner Auxier,
Aye.
Commissioner Beach,
Aye.
Commissioner Bobette,
Aye.
Commissioner Freeman,
Yes.
McPherson,
Aye.
Morgan is not here, Senator Przanski,
He doesn't vote.
thank
No,
you,
no.
and not loose, so then you're good, it passes.
Great. All right, well, that didn't take 15 minutes, so making up a little bit of time, great. Next, we're going to hear about Washington County request to adjust their JRP award.
That's right, and that's me again, for the record, Ian Davidson, Justice Reinvestment Program Manager. So as a reminder, any adjustment requests, how the commission has directed staff to handle these is that if there is a request that exceeds 10% of the total award, we come back to you for approval of that, or if there is a program change. And so what you will see today is a Washington County request that makes a program change. And so otherwise, we normally handle adjustment requests like this. So as you all saw in your packet, there is both a staff memo and then there's a lot of additional information that Washington County provided about this request. At a high level overview, they're requesting to move $550,000 to fund what is approximately 2 full-time deputy district attorneys. They have indicated that without this funding, that those 2 positions would be eliminated in the next fiscal year, and that it would have a negative impact to their local JRP program specifically, would negatively impact their ability to send fewer individuals to prison, in particular for their specialty courts, which help them send fewer individuals to prison. These funds are currently allocated to pay for peer mentors and housing. And then if approved, this movement would take effect the 1st of July, 2024. They did note in their request that they are pursuing alternative funding for both the peer support and housing. Some of those particulars are detailed in the materials provided to you in advance of this meeting. I do want to just highlight a few of the things that Washington County is doing around housing. They have identified 13 beds at their local community corrections center to be used for short-term transitional leave. And Washington County as a whole, as a result of Executive Order 02, Governor Kotek's executive order, in 2023, they opened 175 beds using those funds associated with that executive order. And then also related to that, they helped over 140 households transition into stable housing. So the county is working towards housing more individuals. This distinction would be that justice reinvestment funding would not be used for that housing. So that is, of course, a trade-off that you all have to consider, but that is a very general summary that I have provided. And I want to note that Nate Gallirant, Director for Washington County Community Corrections, he's available, as is his colleague Tim Ellsworth, if you have any questions for me that I am unable to answer about Washington County's request, but I'm happy to entertain any questions if you have them.
Commissioners, questions? I've got a number of questions, and frankly, I'm struggling with this request. I am struggling with the wholesale removal of funding for housing. I understand that they're adding some beds at the CCC. I've got questions about their comment that this will expand short-term transitional leave. Are they not providing resources for short-term transitional leave for people who are eligible already?
They do accept short-term transitional leave. I know they do not use justice reinvestment funding for that, though I imagine they use grants aid.
I, appreciate that they are wanting to pay for 2 DA positions, and that, they're for specialty courts, correct?
Correct.
Ian, can you give me a little bit of background on how frequently JRP funded programs are paying for DA positions? Because in some ways, it's a little contrary to the tenets of JRI, and that we are trying to reduce prison utilization. I get that they're saying that this is for specialty courts, but I think of JRP as funding programs that are designed to reduce recidivism and our dependence on prison.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I could not give you an exact figure right now, but there are quite a few
And I think the other questions I have are maybe more specific to the funding that they are exploring. So they've mentioned impacts and grant and aid. And so there was a comment in here about impacts. Are they not eligible for impact funding?
Yeah, so I believe you're referencing a comment I made in there. So there's now the two kind of types of impacts. The impacts that I'm talking about is the previously approved, currently implemented one. And the Impacts Grant Review Committee has indicated that they will be limiting future funding to current grantees, in which case Washington County, which is not a current grantee, would be ineligible to receive Impacts Grant funding.
Okay. All right. Other questions, comment, commissioners?
I have questions. I have the same concerns that Chair Solomon has. When we're talking about housing, I'm sure this housing is not sufficient for what Washington County needs. So moving money from housing to VA salaries and positions, I find very problematic. And I guess my question is, do you have any sort of forecasting as to the amount of housing is actually necessary and how much it goes above and beyond this adjustment? And then the second question is regarding peer mentors. Peer mentors are critically important to getting people into housing. So what's their plan for the elimination of peer mentors?
Yeah, I'll speak to peer mentors first. They've indicated that they are seeking alternative revenue sources. They have not articulated what those are yet. Some of this is, I think, by virtue of the fact that they submitted this adjustment request prior to the conclusion of session. And so with the additional influx in grant and aid, some of the particulars of what they have proposed may change. I know they identified that they are looking at partnering with their county health and human services to potentially fund some of those peer mentors, or looking at outpatient treatment providers to kind of fill some of those gaps. I share similar concerns. If I may, Chair, to the housing piece, I did my best to ascertain what the housing needs were. They're significantly outstrip any funding that is true even before taking into account this, $600,000. That almost certainly wasn't enough for justice-involved individuals within Washington County. The housing needs within the Portland metro area are immense. And so the argument that I think Washington County, and I hope I'm reflecting their intent correctly, is that they're making is that we have additional housing funds that could be used for housing generally, and perhaps they could be applicable to justice-involved individuals as well. So there's a trade-off there. Do we want to use generalized housing funds versus justice-involved individuals specific housing funds?
Well, as a former director of a housing agency, I know that served people that were justice involved. This is an argument that's come up in the past that we shouldn't be using justice funds, that we should use housing funds to pay for these types of programs. And the simple fact of the matter is there isn't enough money for housing programs, period. And it's so difficult when you totally eliminate funding for a program to simply flip the switch back on a few months later if they're able to pick up funding through some other source. So I struggle with the housing being totally eliminated from their JRP budget. as well as the peer mentors. Yes, Vice Chair Bovet.
Wonder if we could hear from Nate Gow.
Yeah.
Nate, are you online and could you speak?
I am, Chair, thank you, and Co-Chair Bavet and members of the commission. I'm Nate Gowie, for the record. Can you see me and hear me okay?
We can.
Okay. I'd like to share my screen if you didn't have the handout that I think ties some of this together. Can I share screen?
You should be able to now.
Okay, let me see if I can do that now. Okay, so are you able to see that?
1 second. Nate.
Okay, we got you up now.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I wanted to show some metrics as it relates to Washington County's commitment to the JRP program. And you can see that we are way below the baseline that that JRP has historically allowed for us to reduce prison utilization. And I just wanted to emphasize that the district attorney's office is fully committed. And in fact, the PSCC, the Public Safety Coordinating Council, is also fully committed to the JRP program. We are in need to help support the district attorney's office at this time. The county that I used to work for in Josephine, we had requested multiple different DDAs to partner with the Justice Reinvestment Programming, and it worked very, very well. Because they allowed for downward dispositional departures. They trusted our program, they trusted our staff, that we were trying to reduce prison utilization. And that's my experience here in Washington County as well. So I'm hearing one of the concerns that we're shifting some of these funds, away from stabilization types of services. And I share the same concern, quite honestly. The PSCC had a very robust discussion about, which is locally, about moving some of these funds away from peer support and away from the stabilization factors like housing. But I wanted to revisit the key staff that the CJC has identified, one being the deputy district attorney. That is a core function of key personnel. And that's for I believe it was for the competitive piece. This was what part of the presentation that Ian had given a couple of months ago, but it is a key factor for us to make sure that the district attorney's office is whole. Wanted to elevate some of these statistics as it relates to JRP and what our portion is in terms of cost avoidance for Washington County. It's estimated to be about $57 million in cost avoidance. And CJC has invested $18 million in reinvestment funds. This is the letter that is provided to you, I believe, in your packet. This is on behalf of the local Public Safety Coordinating Council, our chair, Rachel, and she had signed this in support of this recommendation to move these funds from the peer support and housing to the district attorney's office. And believe me, we have been doing a lot of our own due diligence and making sure that we still have the resources available here in Washington County. This is our plan. I think one of the commissioners had asked what our plan was, and much of this was developed before session ended. Like Ian had said, we're looking at our local levy dollars. We have not only JRP funds, which represent in community corrections approximately 9% of our overall fund. We also have CCA funds, or community corrections allotment funds, that represent a portion of our funding. We also have levy funds that come from tax dollars at the local level. And then we also have a general fund through the county. So there's a lot of different resources that we're able to sort of move around in terms of funding these peer mentors as well as housing. The Miracles Club work with the clients as a specialized program in a BIPOC community. We also have Going Home 2 offers peer mentor services. We also have 4D Recovery. They offer other mentor services. And these are programs that are not funded by Justice Reinvestment. These are just some examples that I wanted to sort of give confidence to the Criminal Justice Commission that we've done a lot of research on what we can do locally to make sure that we continue to have peer support, peer mentors, and housing resources. So at the very bottom of this slide, it talks about 200,000 from community corrections budgeting towards housing. That's where I have a budget genius that works with us at community corrections that has identified some ability to make sure that we have continued support. We've also elevated our transitional housing program within the community corrections center that we're going to be hopefully expanding that with budget approval locally to 215 beds at the center. And I hope that provides some context to this request. Our local executive team, our local public safety coordinating council is behind this request, and we're really hoping for your continued support in the Justice Reinvestment Programming. Thank you, and I'd welcome any questions.
Questions for Nate? Oh, yeah, Commissioner. Oh, Commissioner Freeman, go ahead.
So thank you. I was just going to make a quick comment, and I appreciate all the background from Washington County and the discussion about their local public safety coordinating council. I'm very much in favor of letting the counties figure out the best way to make this system work. It's very complicated with a lot of moving parts, and having that local input and the team up there working on it, I tend to want to try to support the work they're doing. And with that explanation, I feel very comfortable with the request. Thank you.
Other comments? Yeah, Commissioner Exit.
Well, I just want to say I have the same concerns that Commissioner McPherson and Commissioner Solomon raised. And if you hadn't already said them, I might open with those same concerns. But as the one prosecutor in the room, I will attest to the value of deputy DAs in the justice reinvestment process.
Mm-hmm.
Just anecdotally, our deputy DA in Columbia County, when I was the DA there, was really taking an affirmative role in finding people that were presumptive prison but could be given a chance on a downward departure, and sort of we're actively looking for that kind of person in a way that the trial deputy DA might not be. And then of course, just with any treatment court, you got to have a prosecutor in there, and it's definitely a time intensive role. And often it's the kind of court that sometimes starts at 9 a.m. and doesn't end until after 5 p.m. So it is a big, resource drain, or that's not the right word, but a big resource commitment from the DA's office. So really have a deep appreciation from that. I felt obligated to say something in that regard. I still think I want to be more persuaded that there's that these important services that are provided by peer mentors, housing specialists, people like that there are resources that really will be reallocated for that, and we won't see a change in making sure that those services are provided at the same time. I'm not making this motion, I'm just sort of thinking out loud. I wonder if this is something that, if there's room for more inquiry on our part, we could reconvene after getting more information from Washington.
Yes, thank you for those comments. And I also, it wasn't real clear to me in the materials about, Nate, you mentioned moving resources around, exactly how you would resource funding for the services that you are suggesting to cut. So it would be helpful if we had more information that spelled that out. And, you know, I appreciate the need to fund all of the services in specialty courts, but I really struggle with Washington County's priority of making the DA's office whole and setting a precedent that whenever a DA's office is short of staff, that they can come to us and reallocate money from core services to pay for DAs. That's a precedent that frankly I would struggle with supporting.
And if I may,
Yeah.
Chair, thank you. So just a couple other comments for the commissioners to consider is certainly, I think everyone remembers in the beginning days of justice reinvestment, that our DA partners were some of the most difficult to persuade, if I could put that nicely in a nice term. And that over the last 10 years, we have been able to garner that partnership with most DAs across the state of Oregon. I do recall there being issues with letters of commitment, for instance. So I think it's valuable to see the progress we've made in 10 years and the progress and forward thinking that our DAs have developed over the last 10 years. And with that being said, I certainly understand the voices of the other commissioners, but in various different locations, our specialty courts are core to prison diversion. That really they are the last step before somebody is sent to prison. And if we don't have those specialty court programs, oftentimes the only choice is to send them to prison. So I certainly recognize and hear what you're saying, but I do find value in those partnerships. And my DA could easily say, Jess, I don't have the money to dedicate to our specialty courts. And that would be just a terrible thing in that he would have to focus on his core services. So just throwing those comments out for other commissioners to consider as well.
So I want to go back to Commissioner Auxier's comment and potential request to get additional information.
Looks like you also have, did he already get to speak? Because he has his hand up.
Oh, okay.
He works with Nick Barrier and Tim Ellsworth.
Okay, Mr. Ellsworth, did you want to make a comment?
Thank you. Yes. And my name is Tim Ellsworth. I'm our administrative manager here in Washington County. I just wanted to speak a little bit to some of the questions I've heard and some of the funding we still have allocated. So Nate mentioned in the housing, we still have $200,000 across our general fund, our grant and aid, and our local option levy that will apply to housing to people from the JRP program, as well as other people within Washington County that need Washington County Community Corrections that might need housing. But we do have money still allocated for housing within our budget overall. The second thing on mentors, we still have funding again across those different avenues to fund 5 or 6 mentors going into next year. We'll be utilizing several of those. I don't know the exact number, probably at least 3 that go directly to the JRP program out of other funding to support the current JRP program as it's going today. So we're not completely cutting those out of our budget or out of the service model. We're just reducing them while we go after some of the other funds and work with some of our local partners, such as Health and Human Services, to partner with them. We're working with our providers to help start linking our mentors with their treatment program so that we can possibly bill out some of those services for reimbursement. So we do still have plans to fund those items within our budget. It's just we're moving the money around where it's coming from, and we'll still support those individuals. So I just wanted to try to answer some of the reservations I was hearing about that. And if you have any questions on specifics, I can answer more. Thank you for your time.
Well, in lieu of providing something in writing, can you provide a little more detail about the housing services that you are cutting and what would be replaced and what would be actually lost?
Yeah, I can definitely speak to that. We currently fund a female and a male house within our JRP program. We do full houses with a provider here, Bridges to Change. Our plan is to move one of those houses into funding from our other resources, so we'll still have that house available. And then we're looking to utilize, we also receive FSAP resources, and we fund a complete house out of that for our female FSAP clients. And we never fully utilize the house that we purchase a full house. I think it's 6 to 7 beds for our FSAP clients, and we never have that completely full. So for some of our female JRP clients, we're looking to work with Bridges to combine those two specialty items or those two programs and utilize some of those beds as well. In addition, we have contracts or we have partnerships with various other housing agencies that we can rent a bed by bed basis, not the whole house, but we have several other agencies that we can work with to obtain a bed in the need. As well, like both Ian and Nate mentioned, we'll utilize some of our beds down at our community corrections center to offset some of that as well.
Okay, other questions or comments?
So if I may.
Yeah.
So just confirming what I think that the commissioners are hearing from Washington County is that none of the resources are actually going to be cut. They're just going to be reallocated to different funding streams. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. We're not cutting those wraparound services at all. I want to obviously we won't be funding them at the full amount we were before between both all the programs, but we have resources available to help with the funding as noted. Like with the mentors, we'll still be providing 3. I think currently we do a few. I'm looking to someone else, sorry. I think we have 4 or 5 mentors assigned that help with our JRP program. We'll be reducing that number. But in talking to the manager of our parole and probation division, she feels 3 will adequately cover the staff or cover the clientele as it is today. So a reduction, but not an elimination by any means, no.
Okay, any other questions? For Nate or Tim?
I don't have a question, I have a final comment.
Yeah.
Still, with this program, GRP program, moving $570,000 from housing and peer mentorship to the DA's office, I just feel like it was against the purpose of the program we're actually trying to accomplish, which is to help people and keep them from recidivating, keeping them out of prison. It's a matter of prioritization. Washington County DA's office is very well funded, to say the least. So it's a matter of prioritization. If you're going to prioritize specialty courts and have staff there or not, or you're going to prioritize prosecuting other offenses. I'm going to know about I can't support this policy.
Thank you. All right. I would entertain a motion at this point.
This is Freeman. I'll move to support the staff's recommendation and reallocate the funding.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Would you please take the roll?
Chair Solomon,
No.
Commissioner Auxier,
No.
Commissioner Beach,
Yes.
Vice Chair Bobette.
Puts me in a funny position, of course. I don't technically have an actual or potential conflict of interest under the ethics laws in the state of Oregon because my personal finances won't be affected by this decision positively or negatively in any way. However, I am an attorney with Washington County Council and I work for Washington County. So my preference is to abstain here, but I can see where this is heading. So I think I'm just going to have to abstain.
Commissioner Freeman,
Yes.
Commissioner McPherson.
No.
That gives us 3 no's and 2 yeses. gonna abstain.
Okay, Ian, where does this leave us now?
I can go back to Washington County and continue to work with them, see if I can't bring a different or slightly modified adjustment request to them if they choose to continue to pursue this. Ultimately, it's their local public safety coordinating council that will make this decision, and I'd be happy to attend their next meeting or.
Great, super. Thank you.
And Ian, does the Lipstick have leave to come back and provide us more information? And make the same proposal again with more detail about how these.
I did not hear a motion that would prevent them from doing that, yeah. So.
Okay. All right.
We just have Rachel.
What's that?
We just have Rachel presentation.
Yes, yes. I'm well aware. We're not done yet.
And I apologize, I have to leave at 2 exactly. I'm sorry. I have a 2:30 in Hillsborough, which is gonna challenge me.
All right,
Yes.
yes.
Well,
yeah.
All right, so next up, Rachel's gonna talk to us about the organized retail theft grant program.
Actually gonna stand over here. Very, there we go. Perfect. Okay, Rachel MacArthur. Oh, that's not me. That's
all the way back to the beginning.
I am not Ian. Ian is done for the day.
Let's do the presentation again.
I guess a really quick review. Just a very quick review.
Oh,
I knew it. I knew it.
Okay, for the record, I'm Rachel MacArthur. I'm a policy analyst here at CJC, and today we have an opportunity for a decision to make the rules permanent for our organized retail theft grant program. So, I think you skipped a slide, maybe. Nope. Okay.
Do you want me to go to this one?
Yeah. Just real fast, this is your all's rule today. If there is a decision to make them permanent, then it will kick off public notice. That is it's about 7 weeks long. We do have a timeline for this grant to get money out in the summer. And so that would kind of play in with that timeline. They would go permanent in early May. If the feedback today is that there does need to be some revision of language or anything like that, it would just simply delay that timeline. So that's your all's rule today. And then can you go back? Okay, real quick, just a review of this grant program. It is $5 million over 2 years. Some of the eligible recipients are city and county-based law enforcement entities, community-based organizations. Both of those eligible applicants it's a competitive grant for those 2 different kinds of applicants. And then for the Oregon State Police, OSP, it will be allocated to them. So that's kind of the difference in eligible applicants. So I'm happy to go over anything. I think in your packets you have the rules. Happy to go over any of the language that you may have questions on. There's a few parts in there that I specifically want you all to review and possibly get some feedback. And I apologize, there is a lot of text on here, but I want to make sure that we saw this all at once. So this section right here is the eligibility requirements for applicants. And so this would apply to the cities, counties, and community-based organizations. We convened a rules advisory committee last month and got their feedback on all of these sections that we're going to go over, but on these one in particular, just making sure that the potential applicants that did apply could meet all of these and still kind of be in the spirit of what the bill was for in terms of Oregon retail or organized retail theft. And so I just wanted to make sure that y'all didn't have any feedback specific to this language for eligible applicants. And again, even with CBOs, they do have to meet these particular criteria to be eligible.
Questions for Rachel?
And I just have,
You want me to go to the next one?
yeah. So this one as well, this one is part of the review criteria, and this one was also reviewed by the Rules Advisory Committee. But this is where the commission, you all, will prioritize applications in the review process. And so the Rules Advisory Committee felt that all of these could possibly apply to different types of potential applicants. And so on this one, just looking to see if there's any feedback on anything that's missing, if anything doesn't fit, if there's a need for any revision of this particular language from you all, because this is the part where you all as a group will be prioritizing these applications.
I don't have, you, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. So I'm assuming, is there a grant review committee that these come through first for recommendation to the commission?
Yeah, so that's a great question. If you go to the next slide, this is what it kind of ties into that, is it would actually, the way that it is currently written is it would be staff recommendations to the commission. And so there would not be, as it's written currently, there is not space for a grant review committee. It would just be based on staff analysis, making recommendations to the commission, and then you all would make funding decisions. And so if you want to look back at, with that context, if you want to go back a slide and look at those priorities, that this is what that staff analysis could potentially look like.
Hey, anything more?
Nope, I just, as long as, and then if you want to go to the next one, just want to make sure, oops, on this, that this process as it is written without the GRC is something that y'all are comfortable with for this particular grant program.
I looked at this and I'm fine with the way it's structured. I don't have any concerns. Are there other comments, thoughts from commissioners?
Just to confirm, this was, Chair.
Yep. No.
This is $5 million across the state, so unfortunately not a huge amount, but certainly a way to get started.
And currently one-time funding, my understanding is that there will be an ask external to CHC, I believe, that would be coming for additional funding. But we're also going through the budget process internally, so that may be on a pop list, but that's usually for few of those are advanced. But that's also partially why we've been thinking to do staff recommendations, a smaller amount. Right now it's one time, usually GRC is a reserve for a large ongoing.
Thank you.
All right, so do you need a motion from us? This is an action.
Yes, please. Yes.
Okay, how would you like that motion structured?
Staff recommends that these are approved for permanent filing, that these rules are approved for permanent filing.
Great. Is there someone that'd be willing to make a motion to that effect?
I will, so moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion by Commissioner Exer, seconded by Commissioner Beach. Would you
We
please
will
speak to that?
start with Chair Solomon,
Yes.
Commissioner Exer,
Yes.
Commissioner Peach,
Yes.
Commissioner Freeman,
Yes.
Commissioner McPherson,
Yes.
and it passes.
All right, with that, we're only 5 minutes over, but I think that takes care of business. Thanks for staff and Carl for hosting us, for the opportunity to see all the good work that's been done here in Multnomah County. With that, we'll adjourn the meeting.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim.
Yeah. Yeah.